Hi, I'm Don Jorgler, editor of Claims Journal. Thank you for joining us for Claims Journal's podcast. This regular video series on all things claims related is just one of several ongoing changes here at Claims Journal. We've launched a website redesign, beefed up our coverage of how AI and technology are transforming claims departments around the world, and we're now bringing you a steady stream of expert-written insight on trends and best practices in written and video formats. Stay tuned, there's more to come. Hi, I'm here with Mark Garrett with JD Power, and we're going to talk about a new claims digital experience study they just came out with and what that means for our audience. Hey, thanks for being here, Mark.
Yeah, appreciate it, Don. Glad to be here.
Well, first, can you give me an overview of the 2025 U.S. Claims Digital Experience Study, the methodology, the main findings, the goal?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So what this study is we take a subset of customers that we talk to when we conduct our claim studies, where we're asking customers about their experience going through the entire claim process with the carrier, right? So we have studies where we ask them about the auto experience, we ask them about the home experience. And then what we do at this study specifically is we drill down to those customers who said they engaged with some of the digital channels, right? They went to the website, they went to the mobile app to engage with some aspect of their claim. So we take those customers and ask them a lot more details about that digital experience, right? And so we'll take them through a whole series of questions around whether they reported their claim, whether they submitted photos or videos, whether they used it for status updates, maybe they picked a body shop on the app, something like that. So we'll look at the different services they used. And then we'll ultimately, we're JD Power. We want to hear that voice of the customer. So We'll ask them kind of, how did that experience go? We ultimately, when we roll up and create these scores that we publish, we use a combination of asking them around, what kind of range of services were available, how, clear was the information, that was presented to you, were the channels helpful, right? Did you feel like they were actually moving your claim along, right? Did it help the process? And then lastly, we asked them how easy the channels were to use. And that's where we also, what's unique about this study is we also then look at some of those digital assets that the carriers have. So we gather screenshots on the websites, get screenshots on the app. So we kind of use some of that extra data that we gather and go through those screenshots and say, okay, here's what we see, some of the variations in the industry. And then here's how it relates to how customers are kind of viewing that being easy to use or, being clear information, stuff like that.
I mean, it's safe to say that more insurers are using the digital claims processes and apps, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We've seen this be a real focal point for carriers. And I don't see this slowing down, right? If you think of the amount of money they're spending, that tech investment, yes, we see it shifting to more AI these days, but right. There's still a lot of investment in just getting those, apps and websites, still, increasing the functionality. One thing we touched on in last year's study was when you looked at the investment or when you track changes in the apps, we saw that, claims functionality in mobile apps was one of the biggest investment areas for carriers. So we're still seeing that kind of the fruits of that continue here, where they're doing a lot of heavy messaging, a lot of built inserts, a lot of like marketing campaigns are getting people to start in that channel, right? Hey, you can report this through our mobile app, right? Download the app, report the claim here. They want people to start in that channel because what we find is when you can get them in there, they're much more likely to stay in that channel, right? So then you get the efficiencies of they're submitting photos, maybe they're staying there, they're going to get some of those self-service options to get updates.
Gotcha. Well, what does this study tell us about conducting the claims process digitally? I mean, is it paying off for home and auto insurers?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Is it paying off? I'd say, a couple different ways to answer that. If you think, is it paying off in terms of, is it reducing some of maybe that inbound call volume? I think that's where we're seeing maybe some mixed results. I think that's always one of the benefits of getting people in these digital channels. Now, you should maybe seeing some reductions of those phone calls for those basic kind of status updates. So that's been mixed. Some carriers are seeing some real, I think, savings there where they're reducing that call volume. Other carriers, may not be seeing as much of that decrease. But in terms of, is it enhancing the consumer experience? I'd say that we clearly see that in the data that those using the digital tools are reporting higher satisfaction. So we do see this as a kind of a net benefit to the experience. Now, that being said, depending on, one way we look at the data, though, if you look at maybe the severity of the claim, the dollar amount of the claim, total losses, for example, it skews maybe to a little bit more simpler claims when people can kind of stay in these digital channels, which kind of makes sense. Like as you get more complexity in these losses, you maybe want to talk to somebody, you may leave these channels to have some discussions. But generally, we find that customers are really happy with the digital experience. And what was surprising to me is I believe it was last year's study where we really started seeing the app experience started to eclipse talking to a human, right? Outperforming the call center. We'd always seen, the call center, certainly talking to your agent, really perform well, but now we're seeing that digital experience actually eclipsing that, providing a better experience for customers. I mean, there's a lot you can do to kind of customize and tailor that, the questions being asked, and pulling in external data like the weather or tracking your location, kind of easier to like report some information about your claim, show where the damage is to your car. You can do all these things interactive in the app now, which is helping the experience.
I mean, are people missing the human touch? I mean, or are they more satisfied, really?
I know that's another tough one where it's like, okay, are they missing the human touch? I'd say it's what we see in our data. Again, customers kind of tell us about their experience. We find that it's more the exception that people are really staying in a digital channel. There's still a human touch, I'd say, right? So it's a pretty small proportion. I want to say it's kind of low double digits. I think around 12, 13% of customers say, I primarily stayed in digital channels. Doesn't mean that, they never picked up the phone, but if they say, hey, I reported my claim, submitted photos. So I did that method of inspection through photos. And then I went back to those digital assets, app or websites to get my status updates. That's about 12% of customers. So is it happening? Yes, but it's still kind of the one-off. Even the brands, you think of the big, tech savvy brands out there, I think the highest instance we saw in our study is about 19, 20%. Right. So even kind of the best out there is only getting maybe 1 in 5 customers kind of staying in that digital experience. So people are it's still a mixed, I think, mode of interacting.
I wanted to get back into some data you mentioned there. Is it the same for auto and home? Like if I'm filing a homeowner's claim versus an auto claim, is there a difference in digital preference and digital experience?
Yeah, we do see a slight difference there, I think, but that gap's starting to close. It used to be a wider gap where people were much more likely to start the auto process, which kind of makes sense. It's maybe a little bit more straightforward, less kind of variance in a claim on the auto side. So we found that early on, people were more likely to use those digital channels. Home, they still kind of wanted to talk to somebody. But we are seeing that gap start to close a little bit, getting a little bit more comfortable in that home space as well. And I think carriers often lead with auto in terms of that investment where they're going to, try to revamp that process, and then they'll follow with home. So we are starting to see some of that pick up on the home side.
Well, what are some downsides? I mean, there's always a downside, right? What about being communicated with after the claim is filed? I do most of this in my app. I talk to a person in a call center for a minute, and now I really don't know what's going on, right?
Yeah, right. There's certainly still some kinks in the process. There's some things, carriers are still working out. I think some of the examples that we see in the data, certainly customer comments mention this in the data, where one of the potential downsides is, so I just went through this digital experience reporting my claim. Now my next contact I'm having with somebody, I'm repeating some of that information, right? That can be a real frustration point for customers. So I think that's a real kind of takeaway for the industry too, is how do you, help that transition without being redundant and making customers repeat themselves. Right. Another potential opportunity is, well, how quickly are you following up with that insured after they use a digital process? So another kind of pain point would be they go through that process. Then we ask them, often there's going to be some follow-up. You're talking to an adjuster. There's some conversation there, kind of who's initiating that conversation. And if the customer has to initiate it, right? So maybe they got questions right off the bat. Maybe things aren't clear. It can be a complex process. If they need to reach out and kind of track down, okay, what's happening next again, or asking questions, like that can be an opportunity too, because that can hurt satisfaction if the customer is kind of unclear. They have this period of uncertainty and they got to, make a phone call to talk to somebody.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of claims professional readers, viewers, listeners. I mean, what are they taking from this? I mean, what should they take away? What should they learn from this, from the downsides and I guess the upsides too, right?
Yeah, well, I think, the upside, I mean, clearly we see, I think selling people on the efficiencies that get created out of this process, I think is a big kind of win. It's like getting customers, I think talking to in their language, like, hey, you can speed this process up by using these tools, right? Because people can see that, right? We actually see these claims, people go through that process. You can take some days out of, arranging that inspection, for example, by submitting photos. But I think another point in terms of opportunities for claim professionals, I think it's really important to think about the more you engage with digital tools, you got to realize that the customer's expectations for things like key communication elements that we see in the study, like responsiveness or being available, right? Being available, responding to customers. I mean, that shifts as you get more into digital channels. So where I see the big growth areas are, people using mobile apps, but then texting, right? We're seeing a lot of, growth in texting, kind of back and forth two-way texting. And what we find is the expectations for that immediacy of follow-up right? It's different than phone call, than email, right? So there's an opportunity there. We see a much higher rate of customers saying, they didn't get back to me quickly enough when I'm using some of these digital channels.
Hmm.
Right? So I think that's interesting, where it isn't that old mentality of, hey, a phone call, you've got, just respond to them, same day, 4-hour window or something. It's like text, there's a much shorter timeline there. So,
Well, going into next year, I mean, since we're getting close to the end of this year, I mean, we're going to see more digital tools. Obviously, we're going to see this more remotely. We always talk about AI. I mean,
yeah.
what are people going to be doing next year? What are people going to be experiencing? And what do you think claims professionals are going to be handling next year in terms of the digital experience and delivering the digital experience to consumers?
There's such a wide range of adoption when you look at the different insurance carriers. So,
Right.
there isn't almost a simple answer to that, because it's like, okay, what's it going to be like for the big, the top 10 companies is a lot different than how it's going to look for, maybe some smaller regional players who are kind of lagging in some of those digital experiences. So to me, it's some of those carriers are still playing catch up, right? And a good example I'll give is, when we talk to some of the carriers, we ask about like how many different points in time are you triggering automated updates to customers, right? Going through a claim experience. Like you're pinging them with a proactive status update. On the high end, you got a company who's saying it 10, 11 times we're triggering those updates. You got companies not doing it all, or maybe sending one or two, or saying, hey, our systems are so antiquated, we don't even have those, checks in our processes. I can't even like pull that data out to send an update to a customer, right? So because there's such a wide range there, I mean, everyone's still kind of solving these issues. So some carriers are getting more, rolling more features into that mobile app, right? Getting a better F&O experience, totally revamping that. And then on the flip side, where you've got maybe more IA or AI handling customer service interactions, right? Are we getting those chat bot type of things set up where it's helping craft emails? We know that's happening today, right? AI is helping write emails back to customers. Is it getting that more embedded into the process? I mean, we see there's such a wide gamut of how digital is changing things.
Yeah, you don't know who you're talking to lately,
Well, yeah, I think they'll say they're still being reviewed by adjusters. Just they're having more templates kind of approaching. Hey, these are the typical things we're seeing getting replies to. Having templates go out where do a quick review, get those messages out to to a policyholder.
Great. Well, Mark, I thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, no, it was great. Thanks for the opportunity here to talk about the study. Yeah, and if anyone wants more information, I mean, this is, you go out to jdpower.com, and we've got an insurance folder there where we kind of have all of our studies out there, and we've got several studies we do in the claims space. So happy to have a chance to talk about it.